Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Men's Manual podcast. This is an exciting episode and one I have been looking forward to for a very long time. We have Manual Medical Director and Founder, Dr Earim Chowdhury, in the studio, and we're going to ask him all about him, his journey with Manual, and what has led the company to the point that it is at today. So Earim, I think a great place to start from the top would be to dig a little bit more into your origin story and your journey from maybe school through that life to where we are today.
So, yeah, my story. I always like to go back to my father because I think it's a really important foundational component to who I am today and really, I guess, my genesis story. So my father was an immigrant from Pakistan. He came here when he was 18. He was one of 7 siblings. Came here without an idea of what job he was going to have, how he was going to survive in this country, but came for all of the opportunity and I guess the opportunity to better himself and set up for his family. And I remember hearing his stories around how he would work in factories and electronic companies and sort of worked himself up to eventually set up his own clothing factory. So he sort of had a bit of an entrepreneurial streak to him. I was born and, he obviously met my mum at some point prior to that. And I was one of 4 siblings. And I recall my upbringing being quite tough. My father was bankrupt by the time I was 6. I didn't really get much exposure, I would say, to the world that we have now and sort of the wider world. And so my world was quite small. It was family. It was looking after each other. Sort of making do with just enough, I would say. But through that journey, I think it really instilled in me this core DNA of just very much family is important. Your central unit that you have as individuals is really vital. And actually what really matters in life, what's the minimum you need to be able to survive and thrive and be happy. But also instilled me the kind of drive of I didn't want to be in that situation where I didn't know how to look after myself. I didn't know when we were going to have finances to achieve what we wanted. And then as I got older, my world got gradually bigger and bigger. I got into a really good school. I was quite academically bright and switched on. I remember not quite feeling in place there because I felt it was quite an affluent population with all of the students that were there. A lot of them were driving in with very fancy cars.
And whereabouts in the UK was this?
So this was in Kent, so kind of leafy Kent, southeast London. I'd initially been born in East London, which was at the time quite deprived. And I sort of transplanted from that environment to this leafy Kent, which I think very much that environment, I'm very conscious, was very nurturing to make me blossom. I think if I'd stayed in East London, I think my path would have been very different. I'm always very aware of patients when I see them and look at the circumstances they're in are very much a factor in why they are they end up the way they do in terms of not having access to healthcare, maybe not having access to jobs, not understanding their potential and what that could look like and not being able to fulfill it. So I was very, very grateful for my parents making that plunge into Kent as an area and the school, which I found very tough. I didn't feel I belonged. Everyone was very different, I think, to myself. I went there on a kind of full scholarship, so we weren't able to actually afford it, but got there academically. But I think it opened my eyes to a ceiling of possibility. And at the time, I think, until I went to university, I used to see this as a glass ceiling that I couldn't break through. This was my potential, and I thought, okay, I can get to here. But things kind of, continued to kind of evolve for me. I went to university and really found my tribe. I realized there was a much more diverse group of individuals who came from very different backgrounds. Some of them had similar stories to me. And I really came out of my shell. I was very, very introverted, painfully introverted. We wouldn't be having this conversation back then. And I think when you find that comfort zone, you can then start to experiment with the kind of individual you are. And as you're growing as a young individual, and I'll say this to anyone listening, is don't feel anchored to where you are right now. And if you do feel that you're not in the right environment, in the right place, that actually be aware of your macro environment, the individuals you surround yourself with, and actually try to be more true to yourself and organically try to live the life that you want to live, and also don't be anchored to where you are at this moment in time, because things will evolve. You'll grow as a personality. So I think that's really important. And then in terms of the kind of journey for me, I went to medical school, and that was a big step. Nobody in my whole family had been to university.
Yeah.
I was the first person to live out. So again, that was different for my parents to experience.
Breaking barriers.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that really much led to this journey, which was quite linear in terms of medicine. You have this path that is prescribed for you. Again, your world is quite small at that moment in time. Healthcare is that you become a doctor, and you race to get to a specific profession and a specialism, and you provide direct healthcare, and that's it. And then over time, I came out the other end and rushed into general practice partnership. I was a partner down in Kent. I took over from an amazing, very experienced GP who'd been working for about 30, 40 years. His patients knew him, they loved him. And suddenly this young whippersnapper was parachuted in and he was taken away. So I remember the early feedback I got from a patient was, seeing Dr. Chowdhury very much feels like going through a supermarket checkout. He's very quick at what he does. Clearly he knows what he's talking about, but actually he would just get things done and there wouldn't be much conversation, and we were out the door. And so during that phase, I very much learnt my craft of actually how to connect with individuals outside of just what we learnt at medical school, which was very much, these are the conditions, this is how you look at people, and this is the management plan. And through that journey, I just learnt that actually a lot of what value I was providing was just in that human connection. People just feeling heard, listened to, someone who cares. I remember when I was going through my journey in medical school, my mum said to me, I want you to treat every patient as though they were me. And that's always stuck with me, because when you're in that career and you're seeing a lot of patients end to end, you start to almost habituate to hearing people's difficulties and pains. And then you almost can remove yourself from seeing them as a person. And I think that's probably challenging for people who are not medical to hear that their doctor feels that way. But it's almost a coping mechanism to deal with all of the traumas and the micro traumas that you get in contact with. And so I remember the first year being very, very difficult, trying to win the trust of these patients. But at the end of that, feeling, actually, I've got this gig. I really understand this career as a GP. I'm having impact on individual people's lives. But then was feeling restless internally. I wanted to go outside of the four walls of that consultation kingdom and have a little bit more impact. So I started talking to my colleagues and fellow GP partners about what can we do that maybe has an impact on people's lives outside of them coming to seek help from me. Now, one of the things around the NHS, I think it's a great institution, but it was created back in the 1940s, very much for sick people. So it's very much a reactive system. Now, I think we know that a lot of people have difficulty accessing healthcare now. So I was very thoughtful about what can we do to try to capture these people before they come to us. I remember talking to my colleagues and saying, maybe we could get them to fill in some forms, or maybe we could get them to do telephone consultations, or does this need to come and see me? Is there an alternative way of providing them healthcare? And I was met with a lot of resistance. I think they thought I was bonkers. I mean, even the idea of picking up the phone and doing a telephone consultation back in that day and era, and I'm sounding like a fossil here.
But how long ago was that? What sort of?
What am I? I'm 43 now, so that would have been probably about 15 years ago.
Okay.
I think I've been about 2 decades now in healthcare. So 10 years ago. So not that long ago. But the idea of doing anything outside of someone booking a consultation, sitting in a room with you and having a 10-minute slot to cover their problems felt very alien to my colleagues who'd been in healthcare for a long time. I was very lucky in that practice in that a lot of the partners were very experienced. So I got nurtured in how the system worked. But I could also see it was broken. Like, it wasn't catering to any proactive healthcare. We were waiting until people were sick. And that was a problem, because I think it really didn't serve all the needs of the individuals. And then I realized that I needed to do something outside of the NHS and outside of the system. At the time, I still felt I wanted to be part of that system because I got so much fulfillment from having impact on people's lives on an individual basis. Them knowing my name when I went out to go for a sandwich and sort of would come and have a little bit of chat down the shopping aisle. So I loved all of that, and I knew I was still growing my knowledge and the medical side, but wanted something else to grow that. And I started this journey where I started experimenting with various things. I remember at one point starting a medical education business. That was a lot of hard work because it was just me and my friends, and we had no idea what we were doing. And then started working in digital health. And back in that day, it was a very unknown concept. The idea of people going online and taking healthcare through that method. I think we're all used to it now because of Amazon and Facebook and all the interactions we had through everything else.
And COVID fast-tracked, fast-tracked.
And it's funny you mentioned COVID. So up until that point, there were so many things that were perceived as far too risky to do digitally. And suddenly we step changed on healthcare.
Yep.
And COVID was a terrible, terrible thing for many, many people and for many reasons. And it was absolutely grueling on the healthcare side. But one of the things it did do, it gave people conviction to look at all the possibility of what digital healthcare can provide, not just the negativity and the risk, which is often, I think, the lens that we look at digital health through. And so, I mean, at the end of all of that journey, I learnt my skills within the Digital Forum and how to do it. Saw a lot of organizations that were not doing it how I wanted to provide healthcare. Yeah. I thought they were only solving part of the problem. They were providing prescriptions or they were providing advice, but it wasn't a complete system. And then when I was looking at the wider world, the NHS was broken, in my view. It's very much a reactive healthcare system where individuals have to present with a problem of certain severity before they're seen. Yeah. So unusually, if I went and my blood pressure was starting to creep up, or my blood sugars were creeping up, in a way, I'd get turned away until it reached a certain severity.
Till it's a problem.
It's a huge.
It has to be it has to be a problem that we can fix, rather than you're getting ahead of it and you might have a problem further down the line.
Absolutely. Yeah. And also within the construct of that 10-minute consultation, it's so challenging. I know as a doctor, for me to welcome a patient, get them sat down, talk through their problems, generate a prescription, do a referral, the 10 minutes is just not enough. And it does a disservice to the patients, and it does a disservice to, I guess, the clinician who's trying to administer the healthcare within that time slot. And so Manual was really born out of a sort of an idea in a coffee shop off Regent Street. So myself and George, who's the founder, so we're talking. His background actually was in consumer businesses. He used to work at Deliveroo and TransferWise. And he was asking me the question to say, look, healthcare is so foundational to people's lives. And we've seen how much technology and scalable ways of doing things have really moved the needle in other industries. Yeah. Why is this not happening in healthcare? And this was one of my learnings, that actually when you're in healthcare, you perceive that everyone understands how it works. But actually most people don't know how it works. Like, it's so difficult to get a general practitioner appointment. It's so difficult to know who to see. And actually in the current environment, there's just so much information as well, constantly firing at you on social media. What kind of magnesium should you take? Should you go to bed at a certain time? What things should you be worrying about? Should you be drinking from plastic bottles or not? And it's overwhelming. And so I think when we were having that conversation, I was talking about my journey in healthcare and how much I was struggling with what I was doing and how subpar it felt. And I wanted to have impact on millions of lives for people. But I didn't really know how the technology side worked. Because within your medical sphere, you're very much pigeonholed. You're a doctor, this is where your value is. But actually through that journey, I'd learned to hear people's pain points, the things they were struggling with, what really mattered to them. And actually a lot of that wasn't just what I was taught in medical school. They wanted to feel that there was someone there that could be around and accessible, that actually the conditions that were being fobbed off, they could actually have a solution for. And so we started talking about this idea of a healthcare company that utilized technology. And so have this beautiful synergy between clinical care and technology, and have this almost 1 + 1 = 3 scenario. Yeah. And so from that, Manual was born. There was a phase where we went out and understood what was happening out there in healthcare in the market, and then tried to gain some money to be able to bring to fruition our idea. And then that, for myself, was a real journey. It was an eye-opener. I was in rooms that I'd never been in before.
Yeah.
So I was meeting investors who had invested, like companies I knew, like big brands, which was exciting. It was scary. And then within that, I gained confidence and learned that actually, in a lot of those rooms, I was the expert in my domain in healthcare. Those individuals didn't know healthcare like I did.
Yeah.
And so actually, they were looking for me to provide leadership guidance on actually what matters in healthcare, how can you provide it, and almost to collaboratively unpick the service that we're providing, to deconstruct it back to almost Lego pieces.
Yeah.
And to build it back up better. And I remember the very early days of going to investors and trying to say, well, we've got this idea. Healthcare is really important. It's not done very well. And we'd like a bit of money to fulfill this big mission of helping millions of people get healthcare that is going to transform their lives. And we know there's a big severity of problems and a massive delta between actually people uptaking those solutions. And we want to bridge why that happens. And most people's interaction with healthcare is they see this as they're sick and they have to meet a certain threshold. And it's not a great experience in these grotty general practices or hospitals. And we want to actually take some of the things that people really enjoy engaging with. They love a beautiful product, something that they have an affinity to, or something that it's desirable to consume in terms of content. So we went there with this idea, and there were a lot of conversations where people would say, well, actually, you're just handing out boner pills because we were in erectile dysfunction. Yeah. And what utilization does this have, and how is this different to anything else that's being provided?
Was this like the Dragon's Den style pitches? You and George would stand up there and you'd have your 4 dragons or your 5 dragons, and you'd fire your business plan, and then they'd come back with all these different.
It was absolutely that.
Yeah.
It was absolutely that, and it was frightening because you felt this was your one shot to make this dream come to realization, and it was also, I think, really educating to see the things that were really important to these investors. Mm. But also, I think the bit that connected the most was them feeling their own human stories of poor healthcare. That I found was the most powerful component in being able to make them realize the opportunity here, the mission, the impact on people's lives. And finding that right fit, because you want to have that right marriage between an investor who will give you the funds to do what you need, and for you to then actually interrogate your own idea, and does it make sense? I think a lot of healthcare businesses die because they're too medical or they're too commercial. Yeah. And I think my biggest learnings were ensuring there's a beautiful marriage between those two components, because ultimately you need cash for change. And in medicine, often money is a dirty word, but it shouldn't be, because ultimately we need to invest that money into improving healthcare, to researching, to reinvest into what we do. I woke up this morning looking at the BBC News, and I've seen that the NHS is in a massive hole where it's having to cut a huge amount of services. Yeah. And so we've got to very much be cognizant around that cash for change. You need that cash to be able to do to change the world, and also to reinvest. And so we were able to pitch an idea, and eventually we had an investor who said, well, I'm really bought into this. I'm really excited by this. And then we had a launch, and in the early days was a very scrappy team. I remember the very first office was it was a 6-piece people office. We didn't have any laptops because we didn't really understand how we were funding that. We didn't have a bank account. I remember we had one hire who lasted 2 days because, bless him, I think he was a very experienced pharmaceutical individual, but he struggled with sort of getting his laptop started up, and sort of the nomenclature within a startup world. It's specific phraseologies that are probably a bit unique to a fast-moving type of organization. And he just didn't keep pace, and he probably just felt it wasn't for him, and he didn't survive. And we had a kind of junior colleague who came in next, who actually prospered and ended up being a real vital part of of the organization and it being successful. So I remember those very scrappy early days where we'd be working out of coffee shops, libraries.
It's the fun times, right?
It was fun.
Yeah. Looking back, it's probably...
It was fun, it was crazy, it was wild, and you know, you would have no idea that we would have built this organization and the millions of people that, you know, ultimately we hopefully will be having an impact on. But I think we were nicely naive. And I think that naivety allowed us to drive off into the cornfields with no visibility, but have confidence that actually every day we were just giving our best and every step would lead hopefully somewhere. And that was fun times. And I wish I'd kept a journal. I've kind of retrospectively started trying to remember those days. And then as we sort of launched, it became very apparent that at the time we built this very glossy brand that was beautiful. It had this beautiful turquoise that I loved. It's my favorite color, so slightly biased there. And we had some tube ads and some bus ads, and it was quite fun and quirky. But I think what potentially works and resonates with patients and customers, depending on which term you use and which camp you're in other industries doesn't necessarily resonate in healthcare. Because I think trust is the biggest thing in healthcare. And if you're a new company doing something a bit unusual, it feels so unfamiliar from how people are used to experiencing their healthcare that you don't immediately trust it. And it feels that the intention is not sincere. And it didn't align maybe with what we would perceive our mission was at the time, which was to make this accessible for everyone to feel safe and feel this is going to give them incredible health outcomes. So those early years were very difficult. We were living day by day. We were trying to sort of, you know, celebrate every patient that we would have enroll onto the platform. We were still trying to make things work on the technical side of being able to take a history from a patient, to generate a prescription. We were, you know, some days you would have a clinician who'd go off sick and they were your only clinician because you were so small. And if someone would ever be off on holiday, that whole role would be knocked out and someone else would have to step in. So I remember at the early days, I was doing about 15 roles from legal to regulatory.
In a world where there's no ChatGPT either.
There was no ChatGPT. I had to learn everything, all elements of business. I remember at one point we were trying to solve a problem of trying to find cap tops for our medication bottles. And I then became very quickly an expert in bottle sizing and caps and the materials and what kind of drugs you would package within certain boxes. And then we'd come up with an idea where you'd have this beautiful boxing experience. And then when you'd start to hear feedback from patients, say, well, actually, it couldn't fit through the letterbox. And you'd go back to the drawing board. And these things that you would just not have experience or not have thought of would just manifest as big problems. And even in the early days, I recall we'd have a regulatory inspection of the pharmacy that we owned. And so I'd first learn how to run a pharmacy, how to get that all set up. And we'd get a call to say that the pharmacist inspector was gonna come the next day. I remember driving down to the pharmacy, which was down in Oxfordshire from London, and then we were trying to get everything set up. So I was learning to build these tables that needed to be built. We were sweeping the floor at the end of the day to make sure everything was clean. And this was at the time we were. I guess I was the medical director. Was our operations officer and our business officer. All these senior roles that had nothing to do with pharmacy. We were sitting there building tables and sweeping floors, but it was just part of the journey, and we still got photos of having fun there. And when you think back to those days, they were very formative in learning how to do things from first principles and building up. And then we've obviously carried on growing, and COVID hit. It was one of those times where we were kind of very nervous about what impact that would have on the healthcare business. And actually it was very, very positive. Suddenly everyone was maybe a little bit more cognizant about their health or being a bit more proactive. People were online a lot more and they had a lot more time, and actually digitalization of healthcare was more accepted. And that was an incredible phase for the business. We were suddenly able to upscale to a new office. The business continued to evolve and grow, and get patients onto the platform, and the team got bigger.
So in the first iteration of the business, as one of the investors said, you were selling boner pills. How did the sort of product offering and services that you were providing, how did that kind of develop as the company matured?
So I think initially we started in men's health because we could see that there was a huge problem in men seeking help. Generally, I think they were very embarrassed about seeking help for erectile dysfunction, hair loss, these embarrassing conditions that are generally underserved and undercatered from traditional healthcare services. You wouldn't often see a patient come for those issues because they'd feel embarrassed and they would think they'd be fobbed off, which is the reality. That's exactly when with my GP hat, and I can wear that and say, actually, I probably wouldn't have given it as much credence as someone who's coming for diabetes. And when you would hear about it, men would talk to you about one issue, and right at the end they would mention, "Oh, by the way, doctor," because again they wouldn't feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And also, I think for men it's very difficult to find time out of their work schedule. Even now, I have things that I'm putting off myself because I want to prioritize work. So that was the area that we initially focused in because we could see that there was the biggest need that was being underserved. And then over time, the business has evolved because that was never our mission, just to play in those arenas of dermatology and sexual health. We knew the problem was significantly wider, but we wanted an entry point. Because if you try to do everything, you do nothing. And it's much like health. I think if you are too transformational, it's difficult to sustain. And if you don't sequence in the right way, you don't build the foundations to build those healthy habits upon. And so over time, that's now evolved into weight loss, menopausal care, testosterone replacement. And so very much we're looking at now what we would consider maybe the 70-90% of preventable health causes, and very much trying to tackle those. And so in terms of the current offering, it's a full stack offering. And what does that mean? It means that we provide everything from the moment that you see an advertisement or information about a service all the way through to a prescription and aftercare and full wraparound care. Because I think for us it's very important that everything is looked after for you. We don't want to have to create this really disjointed, fragmented journey, which we're used to experiencing from the NHS and current system, where you book a consultation through one forum, you then see another doctor in one clinic, then you drive somewhere else to get a prescription, and then you have to go every month to go back to that.
It's another barrier to entry that men just don't want to lean into.
And it's so fragmented in terms of one person's generating a prescription and another one's providing you the aftercare or the kind of coaching or the dietitian support, the psychiatric support. So for me, that doesn't work. Ultimately, I want this to feel very cohesive and for the patient to feel part of their own care and to feel empowered. And so very much for us, it's around a unified place where you can look after these core conditions that really matter to your well-being. I think Peter Attia covers it quite well in terms of the 4 horsemen, in terms of causes of death. And I think there are just these core conditions that if you can solve those, and generally I would bucket them under metabolic health, that actually they will transform your life. And so that's currently where we are. And we're constantly evolving in the scope of what we're looking to treat and how deep we're going. And again, I think it's just that careful sequencing, because a startup and healthcare business is very much like driving a plane whilst it's on fire. The passengers are asleep, all the alerts are on, and you're gently trying to fix the engine at one time, and then the propellers get working. And so you've got to be able to do the important elements and then continue to build. I think even looking out of the wider world, there are no healthcare providers that I think are catering to everything that's required within healthcare. Yeah. And so there is very much a need still on the healthcare side. It's still very nascent, very early compared to other more mature businesses, but it's so foundational to everything we're built on. And so ultimately there's just always more and more we can be doing. And so for us, the way we view things is we've just scratched the surface. We're probably touching around 1 million people that we've impacted the lives of.
Which is a huge number.
It's a huge number, but I still see the opportunity to have impact on all of the several millions of people. Even if you look at the NHS right now, I think there's a waiting list of about, I think 1 in 7 people are on a waiting list for some form. Yeah. And again, that's just very much that reactive healthcare. And at the moment, the way I see healthcare is that people are living longer and longer, but they're dying slower. And what do I mean by that? Is that health lifespan has got longer, but people are spending more of their life in sick years. And ultimately, we have to get that balance right. We're seeing that life expectancy goes up, and there's been a plateau recently. I think COVID has been a factor. But actually, we want to make sure that those individuals are living those years in good health. And so there's not enough happening on the proactive healthcare side. And so I see healthcare as this almost big universe where you have people who look after their health proactively, and then the wellness space, and there's the medical care. And there should be very much a good, happy medium and a happy balance where if you have a health condition, you can actually move back to going into good health and solve from being in a constant sick state to actually moving to actually living better and having a greater health potential. Like, we know the NHS will spend a lot of money on chronic disease, and it's because it moves to just keeping people on treatments and actually not moving the needle on all the other elements. And so for us, tangibly, we want to ensure that people are sleeping better, that they're feeling that they're getting social connection, they are psychologically and physiologically well, that they are moving, that they're doing all the elements that I think matter in life, and that they are also unearthing conditions they may not be aware of, because a lot of these may be ignored. And I think everyone's well until they're not. Yeah. And that's often the switch. The most motivation patients I see are the individual who's just had the heart attack, or the individual who's just had children. They suddenly are becoming more aware of their own mortality and their responsibilities. But I very much want to move to everyone feeling that healthcare isn't this very difficult thing. Because when I almost steer away from using the word proactive healthcare or prevention, because it makes this seem like an arduous task. But actually, you want this to be something fun and part of your general day-to-day. Actually, what can you do that you enjoy that actually does mean that you live better, you feel happier, the years that you do have, they're much more complete and full, and not burdened by chronic disease of some form. Yeah. And so it's always that healthy balance and intersect.
And so if we're looking at the timeline from when you guys are scrapping around in a Starbucks, trying to turn on your laptops to these, beautiful 4 walls of the office you now have in central London, what's the timeline on that? How many years has it been? It's
been 6.5 years, probably about 7 from when we had the idea. Yeah. So a lot of hard work. I think we're still at that stage where we're very much aware of every patient that we have. We have this channel on it's a system called Slack, which is a messaging channel for the company. And we have something called Voice of the Customer and Voice of the Patient. And so every customer feedback that we get drops onto that channel. Interesting. And so everyone from the CEO to whoever they are will see that. And we will religiously look at that. Because for us, like, the trust side is so important. What people feel and experience is vital to what we're building, is that we want people to have an incredible experience. That's what we feel proud about. That's what everyone gets up in the morning, and everyone who works here, is that I want to tangibly change people's lives. I want them to feel that this is a company that really cares about them. And actually, we want to see that uplift in their life expectancy, their well-being, their quality of life, and not just see them as a number or a HbA1c or a cholesterol marker. Yeah. They're much more than that. They're individuals with very rich lives. And so we will religiously look at those feedback scores and comments, because for us, that's just gold. Someone's taken their time out to comment about either what's gone well or what's gone bad. And so we'll look at that. And that's constantly feeding into what we're doing. And there's a lot of it. I mean, it's like the duck. There's so much flapping of feet under the surface, and there is this polished exterior, but there's just a lot of craft and hard work that goes into that. A lot of dedicated individuals. And the lifeblood of any healthcare company, I think, is the patient's number one, and them trusting you with their care, and we really take that seriously. And the second thing is the individuals that work to make that a realization. So everyone from the clinicians to product teams, so they're kind of tech, marketeers, finance departments, the regulatory individuals. There's just so many layers. The individual who makes sure the cat bottles are the right size now.
Used to be your job. He's stolen your job.
Oh, it's leveled up since I dropped it, I must say. And so it's just being very cognizant of that responsibility that you have. And for us, we again just see that increasingly there is just so much left to do. And so it's a really very much an unfulfilled mission. And we've had definitely a lot of proud moments. I mean, even within the last year, for myself, on a personal level, I was invited to number 10 Downing Street. I've got this picture, which is on my WhatsApp now, outside number 10, which was a really proud moment to be able to provide some input to their digital health strategy. I've been a couple of times to the House of Lords and the House of Commons. These are not arenas that I thought I would be talking in, but increasingly, I found myself as one of the UK authorities in digital healthcare. And that's been hard earned, but it's also, as a result of all the patients that have trusted us, and we have so much information about providing healthcare to them, that now tangibly we can have an impact on more and more people, not just in the company, but at the kind of at the country level and on a kind of almost global level, and really be a part of the conversation narrative around digital healthcare. And then we recently were placed 16th on the Sunday Times tech list as well, which is a really proud moment to get invited to this ceremony. I was actually sat next to one of the banks that I bank with as well, and a few of the other companies that I kind of liaise with in my personal life. I was selling my car through another organization that was there. So these were brands and organizations that I trust for other components of my life. And then to feel that we'd met the criterion of being one of the fastest growing companies in the UK was a proud moment. And I think it's important to celebrate these things, but also not to anchor to them too much, because ultimately, I think you can't feel satisfied with where you are. And I think this is one of the things when you are building a company that is trying to do what we're doing that is super difficult. There's hardly anyone around the world that solved healthcare. Healthcare is infinitely more complex than financial services or even getting your Amazon packages. There's just so many variables, and you're dealing with human lives. And again, I'm probably biased as a doctor, but there's nothing that matters more. And so there's this huge responsibility. And so for us, it's a case of you've got to continue to push for the excellence and keep going and keep going. And I think that gives you the drive to be relentless. And one of the things I would say to anyone listening is, and if you are thinking about starting your own organization, is that you need to have that feeling of relentlessness and restlessness. Like you can never feel complacent about where you are, because that will just lead to a dropping of standards. So you've just got to constantly continue to improve. And it's not an easy journey.
Yeah, I find it fascinating about the sort of attention to detail when it comes to the customer feedback. So what's kind of like the overwhelming sort of trend and volume of feedback that you're getting, and both positive, as in what are the good things people are saying about Manual, but also what are the things that you still need to work on and that you're actively doing to improve the service? Yeah,
I think one of the things I'm aware of is just people are so diverse. So what works for one individual can feel not favorable, poor or not well thought out. And so it's how do you try to cater to everyone and provide a personalized journey for them? I've started with the negative. It just shows what my personality is like. But I think that's the difficult part. How do you do something that is for everyone, and you are providing at scale for millions and millions of people that will feel personal to them, so they can feel that they are an individual that you care about, that you've really thoughtfully provided the service to, and that actually it is applicable to their life. Because you don't want to provide the same service to a mother who's got 5 children, is part-time and sort of working and juggling multiple things, and you have this really onerous program that you want her to adhere to, or is too far away from where she is, or the biohacker individual who actually wants to be very much at the pinnacle of optimizing their health, and they want the full fat everything. They want all the tests. They want maybe 24/7 wraparound service. So it's just, I think that's the challenging part. And also I would say straddling the boundary between what is perceived as new and innovative and regulations. Yeah. So regulations are always backward looking. Most of the discoveries in medicine, let's say from antibiotics to vaccines, and a lot of these are kind of quite accidental or have come from something that's wild, that's gone out there and very much explored and experimented and unlocked something that doesn't currently exist. And so we know that everything we're building at the very cutting edge is new. And so we just got to be very mindful around how do we articulate the safety of that? How do we give conviction to regulators, to patients, that actually it is something that's effective, it's safe, it's going to provide them real world impact. And so I think those are the challenging components. There's lots more challenges, but kind of just trying to distill those down to a few core things. And then in terms of the kind of the good stuff, I think overwhelmingly the story we hear again and again is just people telling us about how there were problems that they just ignored and they just didn't feel they could move the needle on, and how their lives have been transformed. We have so many incredible testimonials and they're really deeply moving. And we actually carve out a lot of time in the organization to kind of cover them and talk about them, because we're very cognizant that not everyone in the organization's in traditional healthcare. So we've got people who work in tech and have come from other industries. And to really get them much, much closer to hearing the real world impact that they have. Because I think it makes it much more tangible, the job that you're doing, whether it is on top bottles or a box on the website. Actually, what is it doing for individuals? And I think that's just so motivating to hear a story about someone who was feeling bullied about their weight, and they've struggled with their weight for over a decade. They've tried multiple different programs and they haven't worked for them. And then to feel that they've found their tribe and something that actually does solve for an issue that they've struggled with, that tangibly has impacted their relationship, their job, their ability to get up in the morning, not to feel embarrassed about the clothes that they're wearing. And to then get into a place where they feel confident, they metabolically are better and healthier in themselves, that they can go about and shop for the clothes that they want. They feel that they've resurrected their marriage. It's absolutely life-changing. And to hear it, people describe it in the words that matter to them and the way that it has changed them. That's what gets me up in the morning. And very much, I think, gets a lot of people up who work here. And so, if you are listening and you are a patient, definitely tell us more of those stories. We love hearing them. Even in those seemingly insignificant problems that people would consider, your vanity around your hair, just shave it off. And I read a lot of these comments. I read a lot of the social media comments. And I've done social media posts myself, and I've had the comments, oh, look at this doctor, he looks really unhealthy himself. Look at his belly. Yes, I have put on a little bit recently. I've been on holiday. And these sorts of, we have comments around, some of our prescribers and saying, oh, is this only for black people? And you hear some negative parts. You can almost skew towards feeling that's the world and the perception. But actually, when you hear the positive stories, the millions of people who are saying positive elements, you realize there's always going to be this component especially on social, where people feel they can make these comments and there's not a human behind the organization. But actually, I think that's also the world that our patients live in. Yeah. They hear people talking to them and saying, oh, you're fat and lazy. Or, why are you bothered about your hair? You're just vain. And when I was younger, I was losing my hair, and I recall all the gymnastics I would go through to make it look thicker. Camouflage. I'd be really conscious about the wind when it would blow in a certain direction. And maybe this resonates with people who are listening. And I actually got on to treat myself, and it thickened my hair up. And I'm 43 now. I'm probably a lot more confident than I was in those early years that I alluded to earlier in this podcast, where I was mentally much more fragile, and comments people would make would really deeply hurt me, although I wouldn't sort of reveal that. And so I put myself in the shoes of the patient who's also feeling that. And so that's also what a lot of us, or a lot of our clinicians will be very aware of, is these individuals who come to us, we're solving these problems which do matter to them, do tangibly have a real impact about how they can go about their lives. And if you can make someone's hair thicker and they feel confident in themselves, that is really one of the best things you can give anyone. And so we very much love the ability to be able to help people with these things. And it matters a lot to us. So yeah, I think that's definitely one of the areas that I think is the rewarding part of the job, and from the positives of what we hear from our stories, that's what matters to us.
So you're 6.5 years in, it's all going really well. What do the next 6+ years look like for you, and what are you kind of most excited about, not only with healthcare, but the vision and the journey that you're on at Manual?
So I'm very aware at the moment that healthcare is not working for people, and I think we've built a platform that has started to solve for a range of problems. I think the next exciting thing for us is looking at how to unify those problems together to look at this patient increasingly holistically. And I hate the word holistic, but actually individuals are not just a collection of medical conditions that are treated in a silo. Yeah. There's so much overlap between a single condition and another. And traditionally, I think in medicine, we've looked at solving that problem and discharging the patient. And really what I want to do is to see how can we start to solve for a range of conditions in one place that caters towards when they're sick, and then also to proactively support them in absolutely living their best life. So we want to add good years to life, and that's the mission. People, as they start to live longer and longer, are going to increasingly fall into poor well-being unless they start to look at the components that are going to keep them fit, healthy, happy, all of those areas. And so for Manual and Voy, that's very much the focus now. How can we unlock their health potential? How can we look at them wider than just a clinical biomarker and add quality of life and make that really enjoyable? Like, let's make healthcare sexy and not a sick care system. Yeah. How can we move to actually making it not just about sick care, move to what healthcare should be, which is living better for longer?
And I think that is a great place to wrap this up. That has been a phenomenally insightful conversation. I really appreciate your openness. I appreciate your transparency. And I really hope that all of you guys watching and listening at home have enjoyed that too. If you've liked this conversation and you want to hear more, please hit the subscribe button. Please leave us a comment. As in, Dr. Earim said that one of the things that we really like to hear are how you have consumed and enjoyed this stuff. So if you've got feedback, please leave it in the comments. We love reading it. And until the next episode, we hope you stay well, and we'll see you next time.